Understanding Judaism and Zionism, thanks to Israel SHAHAK's book, Jewish History, Jewish Religion, Prejudice and Prevarication, following defense mechanisms. What were the detailed mechanisms, other than bribery, employed by Jewish communities in cooperation with outside forces in order to ward off the attack on the Talmud and other religious literature? Several methods can be distinguished, all of them having important political consequences reflected in current Israeli policies. Although it would be tedious to supply in each case the beginnistic or labor Zionist parallel, I am sure that readers who are somewhat familiar with the details of Middle East politics will themselves be able to notice the resemblance. The first mechanism I shall discuss is that of surreptitious defiance combined with outward compliance. As explained above, Talmudic passages directed against Christianity or against non-Jews. Note: in the end, a few other passages also had to be removed, such as those which seemed theologically absurd, for example, when God is said to pray to himself or physically to carry out some of the practices enjoined on the individual Jew, or those which celebrated too freely the sexual escapades of ancient rabbis. End of note. Had to go or to be modified. The pressure was too strong. This is what was done. A few of the most offensive passages were bodily removed from all editions printed in Europe after the mid-16th century. In all other passages, the expressions Gentile, non-Jew, stranger, in Hebrew, Goy, Eino, Yehudi, Nochri, which appear in all early manuscripts and printing as well as in all editions published in Islamic countries, were replaced by terms such as idolater, heathen, or even Canaanite or Samaritan, terms which could be explained away, but which a Jewish reader could recognize as euphemisms for the old expressions. As the attack mounted, so the defense became more elaborate, sometimes with lasting tragic results. During certain periods, the Tsarist Russian censorship became stricter and, seeing the above-mentioned euphemisms for what they were, forbade them too. Thereupon, the rabbinical authorities substituted the terms Arab or Muslim, in Hebrew Ishmaeli, which means both, or occasionally Egyptian, correctly calculating that the Tsarist authorities would not object to this kind of abuse. At the same time, lists of Talmudic omissions were circulated in manuscript form, which explained all the new terms and pointed out all the omissions. At times, a general disclaimer was printed before the title page of each volume of Talmudic literature, solemnly declaring, sometimes on oath, that all hostile expressions in that volume are intended only against the idolaters of antiquity, or even against the long-vanished Canaanites, rather than against the peoples in whose land we live. After the British conquest of India, some rabbis hit on the subterfuge of claiming that any particularly outrageous derogatory expression used by them is only intended against the Indians. Occasionally, the Aborigines of Australia were also added as whipping boys. Needless to say, all this was a calculated lie from beginning to end. And following the establishment of the State of Israel, once the rabbis felt secure, all the offensive passages and expressions were restored without hesitation in all new editions. Because of the enormous cost which a new edition involves, a considerable part of the Talmudic literature, including the Talmud itself, is still being reprinted from the old editions. For this reason, the above-mentioned Talmudic omissions have now been published in Israel in a cheap printed edition under the title Hesronot Shas. So now one can read quite freely, and Jewish children are actually taught passages such as that which commands every Jew, whenever passing near a cemetery, to utter a blessing if the cemetery is Jewish, but to curse the mothers of the dead if it is non-Jewish. Note: Tractate Berachot, page 58b. Your mother shall be sore confounded, she that bare you shall be ashamed. Jeremiah chapter 50, verse 12. End of note. But in the new Israeli edition of Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz, complete with Hebrew explanations and glosses to the Aramaic parts of the text, so that school children should be in no doubt as to what they are supposed to say, the unambiguous words Gentiles and strangers have been restored. Under external pressure, the rabbis deceptively eliminated or modified certain passages, but not the actual practices which are prescribed in them. It is a fact which must be remembered, not least by Jews themselves, that for centuries our totalitarian society has employed barbaric and inhuman customs to poison the minds of its members, and it is still doing so. These inhuman customs can be explained away as mere reactions to anti-Semitism or persecution of Jews. They are gratuitous barbarities directed against each and every human being. A pious Jew arriving for the first time in Australia, say, and chancing to pass near an Aboriginal graveyard, must, as an act of worship of God, curse the mothers of the dead buried there. Without facing this real social fact, we all become parties to the deception and accomplices to the process of poisoning the present and future generations with all the consequences of this process.